Hey everyone, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com, and I'm here today with another project update video for this 1/6 scale radio-controlled Armortek T34 85. Since the last video update, the last of the hull details has been fitted. At this point here, the hull's done. It's actually ready for painting, and as for what that entails, well, we'll be going over all that information in this video. So stay tuned, because there's going to be a bunch of cool info coming your way. Picking up where we last left off in the previous video, the hull details were getting finalized, and the last thing to add, or one of the last things to add I should say, was the headlight. The headlight is the last function that needs to be added to this build in order to get it closer to completion. And here you get to see the pieces of equipment that are going to be required for the headlight. So here we have the ECA T34 headlight set. This is a 3D printed component. I already mentioned this in greater depth in the previous video. But here you get to see it pre-primed and also prepped for installation. The primer was added to the surfaces that you see here, but I also went ahead and added a shot of silver paint on the inside for a couple of reasons. First, when it comes to headlights, you want to have the thing thoroughly primed with flat black or any other type of paint, but I personally like flat black because it prevents any sort of glowing. Remember, this is a plastic material, and a lot of times, depending on the type of plastic, if there is a light emitting from the inside, a lot of times the piece will actually glow, and that's not exactly helping you. So in order to combat that, it's good to have layers of paint built up on it in order to just act as an insulator and prevent that from happening. The flat black is a great way. Again, it's added to all the surfaces, both inside and out, and this is going to add a nice little barrier to prevent any sort of glowing from happening. On top of that, of course, on the external portions, after the vehicle progresses further and gets another shot of primer, or even the layers of base coat and other paints added to it, this further builds up layers, which will further prevent the piece from any sort of glowing type issues. The other thing to mention with the inside was I went ahead and added a shot of silver spray paint. This was done for two reasons. First, again, to combat the glowing, and the second thing was to just add a bit of reflective surface so that the light can be bounced outward where it needs to be. And furthermore, it looks a little bit more realistic when the lens is popped in place and the inside portion of the bulb housing is silver. The last thing I need to mention is I drilled a small little hole. I added a 1/16 of an inch piece of rod to this so that I could plug it onto the vehicle. This will be much stronger of an installation as opposed to just going with adhesives alone. Not shown on the table at this time is the clear lens. Again, I went into that in more depth in the previous video, and there's nothing really much more to mention about that. So let's go ahead and continue. The other piece of equipment that we have here on the table are purely for the electronics, getting the thing hooked up. So we'll start with the LEDs. Here's the LED right here. I'm using a white LED. And basically all the equipment here was procured off of Amazon or eBay at one point. The LED and the resistors were procured off of Amazon for certain. And these here are 12-volt LEDs. I have the Amazon links, by the way, for these pieces of equipment in the video link below, or in the description below. And these here are 12-volt LEDs for the portion of the vehicle's electronics that are going to be hooked up to the patched in. Those are going to be between 6 and 12 volts, so you want to have at least 12-volt rating on the LEDs just to prevent them from burning out. In addition to having the LEDs be 12 volt, I'm also going to patch in a resistor just to further prevent the LED from burning out over time. Even though the things are 12 volt rated, it seems like after a while they do have a habit of burning out, so the addition of the resistor here is something that definitely comes in handy and prevents that from occurring. For the resistors here, these are just some I had on hand. I believe these are spare from the King Tiger build that I did. And these are, let's see now, 51 ohm resistors. Again, the link for these are going to be found in the description. The next two pieces of equipment are very important. This here is the remote switcher. In the past, I would use a servo and a toggle switch type setup where you hit the switch, the servo actuates the switch, and now you have current. I have since replaced those many builds ago with this system over here. It's really, really simple. This I think I procured off of eBay, if I'm not mistaken. This was just one of the ones I had on stock. In fact, I think this is the last one I have on stock. Same with this fellow over here. So I need to restock because I do have some other Armortek builds that are in the lineup. Anyway, this thing here, it's fantastic. It's really super easy to follow. You just plug it in and hit the switch, and it does the job perfectly without the use of a servo. Really, really nice piece of equipment, and I love these things. The next piece of equipment is something that's very, very important specifically for this vehicle. And this here is a transformer. More specifically, it's a DC converter regulator. So the vehicle's electronics are 12 volt, and this thing here will actually take the voltage and reduce it to a much lower voltage, which again will be handy in preventing any sort of things from burning out. This was something, by the way, that was recommended several builds ago by a customer of mine. He's a good buddy of mine, and we always chat back and forth on these things, and he swears by these things, and frankly, he's absolutely correct. Fantastic bit of equipment to add if you're doing these 1/6 scale tanks, be it from Armortek or anything else, and you're going to add extra accessories such as spinning fans, lights, all of the bells and whistles. These things here become absolutely paramount for your build. Fantastic bit of equipment, very affordable, and very easily obtainable. Again, this thing I think I picked up off of eBay, but I'm pretty sure these days you can find these things on Amazon. I'll see if I could track one down. I'm not really sure or not, but I'm pretty sure these things are fairly commonly found. Here goes the thing right here. So this takes 24 volt and steps it down to 12 volt, and then from 12 volt, the resistor is going to probably step it down a little bit lower, so again, it will be optimum working range for the LED in question. But the thing is pretty straightforward. In, out, can't really screw it up. That's always something that makes life easier on my end. As for how this patches into the tank's electronics, I'll be showing that momentarily. Jumping back into the shop, here we have the equipment now mounted to the model and everything is fully functional. I'll go ahead and test fire it up in a minute, but before I do that, I just want to show the basic layout on how everything here plugs together. The setup is really simple. The first thing we need is the power supply cable, and that is what we have right here. This here connects to one of the ports on the main power supply, and this thing outputs, I believe, 6 to 12 volt DC, if I'm not mistaken. Well, anyway, this here is what's going to be used to actually power the light. On several other builds, if it has more functions or more features to it, I generally go ahead and splice this with a connector type jack that then splices out all of the two wires into several others depending on what the situation is. Some notable examples would be, for instance, on the Tiger 1 or the King Tiger, where I need to have a working light, I need to have functional fans, and other gizmos of the sort. That is when that type of a system becomes relevant. For the T34 over here, that's not going to be the case, so this thing here is only going to be used for the light. Anyway, so here we have the power coming from the tank. This here gets mated to this device that I mentioned before. That is done with these two wires right here. The black and the red connect directly to the matching colors that emit from the power supply. Oh, also in the power supply, this cable here is one that I personally added. The Armortek setup has something similar to a plug like this guy over here, but I went ahead and replaced it prior to the installation with a longer wire just because it gives me extra reach and more flexibility compared to the kit one. Back to the power box. So it gets connected right here to the main power. From here, the voltage is now going to be reduced to a lower setting, which again is going to be beneficial to the LED. So then we have these two wires over here, another black and the yellow. These here are going to connect to the bulb, but are also going to connect to the switcher. The way this works is that the switch interrupts the positive lead, just like it would with a standard toggle or a slide switch, but it's done remotely. Same premise though in terms of hooking up with the electronics. So the positive gets patched into this fellow over here, and then the other red one here actually has a resistor that's soldered in to, again, further bump the voltage down to ensure that the LED has long life. From here, it then connects to the power, or the positive lead found on the LED, which runs out to the external portion of the vehicle. For the negative lead, i.e. the black one, this just goes directly into the black line with no fuss, no muss. From here, the next thing to hook up on the switcher is the power cord, and this here just simply plugs in and then connects directly to the receiver on the port that I deem fit. Once it's all patched in, the system works absolutely perfectly, and it's a really simple setup, and it's one that I've used in the past and will continue to use in the future because of just how easy it is to get your model to have remote switching. However, before I go ahead and do that, I am going to go ahead and clean this up a bit. with some zip ties. I'm also going to go ahead and permanently mount this to the side portion of the hull over here with some silicone, so it's permanent, but for whatever reason needs to be ripped out, it can easily be done. No point chatting some further. Let's go ahead and progress further with the video. And on the external portion of the vehicle, of course, this is the final outcome. So here you can see the 3D printed housing now fastened to the tank permanently. The piece is fastened in place with use of adhesives, some epoxy sculpt for the welds, but also, most importantly, there is a steel shaft that is drilled into the center portion here of the bracket, and then a corresponding holes drilled into the hull, and that, with the adhesives, gives it strength and it'll really keep it in place unless something catastrophic happens, like it takes a good thwack. But something like that can break really regardless of the materials in any way. So either way, the unit is permanently mounted to the model. Also, the unit, of course, is patched into the electronics. The tank is currently on, so without wasting any more battery power, I'm going to go ahead and trigger the unit on the radio, and voila, the light works. So one thing I like about this system is that it's totally silent, unlike the analog systems in the past where you use servos, where you hear the little on this one here. That's not the case. This thing is totally silent. You just hit the switch on the radio, on the channel of your choice, and the light turns on. So on, off, it's as simple as that. Here on the back end, you can see the installation of the piece hopefully a little bit better. Where the piece was fitted, you can see the epoxy sculpt that was added to give the look of the weld beads, which of course would be appropriate for the real one. But as I mentioned before, on this one here, the epoxy sculpt does twofold. Not only does it help with the detailing, but also it helps giving it extra strength compared to just leaving it alone. Is this something I'm going to potentially rectify on the production sets? The jury's still out on that. The reason why I didn't go ahead and add the integral 3D printed welds as I normally do, and actually did to the Siren over here, is because I wasn't sure if I had to fudge the angle at all. When you're designing stuff in the ether, sometimes you may have something that's slightly off, and that could potentially throw off the alignment. Well, I didn't have that problem. I nailed a bullseye in the dark. So with that in mind, I'm probably going to go ahead and revisit this piece in CAD and add the weld beads to the detailing sections, which will complete the look, and it does make installation a bit easier. Now you don't have to sculpt the stupid things. Some people out there, on the other hand, they love sculpting the weld beads, and if that's you, that's cool, but that's something I may offer as an option, but most people tend to dig the integrally printed on weld beads. If you're wondering, yeah, but John, what about strength? Well, the extra added weld beads that are printed on give more surface area, which in turn give it a better structure for the glues to adhere to thus keep it on the model. So really, it's a win-win either way. Also on this side over here, the Siren has been mounted as well. The Siren, unlike the Headlight, has a integrally printed on stem, and that just gets drilled and the piece just plugs in place. The reason why the stem is okay for being printed on this one is because, unlike the Siren here, this is in a much less snag-prone location, so the printed stem is more than suffice, or at least I feel. As I mentioned before, if this is something that you want to revise, you can easily do that. Just snip away the stem, drill it out, and put in a piece of wire, and you're essentially good to go. The only thing required left on this guy here are the two little wires that emerge from the two stems, and these will snake around and plug into this section over here, but this is going to be done after the unit is painted, just so you have the cool little black wires. The one other thing to mention about the Siren is that what's really interesting is that it actually points rearward, which is something you don't really see that often on military vehicles. Generally, when you see Sirens in place, say on US vehicles specifically, they tend to be pointed forward, but on the T34 here, it's not the case. Specifically, these wartime ones, they tend to be facing in the reverse direction. So take that for what you will. With the headlight function taken care of, I'm going to circle back to something else I've been kicking down the road for the longest time, and that has to do with the main power switch. So on this generation of Armortek kits, the power switch is in this nice little CNC'd aluminum little box right over here with this nice satisfying little button to push, and we have a nice little LED for good measure. The unit has this back plate that is laser cut steel and is bolted onto this section over here with two little dome fasteners. And basically it plugs in with this 3-pin plug, and you could mount it anywhere you wish on the tank. This I actually like. This is one of the features found on this generation of Armortek kits I rather enjoyed a lot, because Believe it or not, the location of the power switch is very relevant, specifically on a 1/6 scale tank. And with the way they were implemented in the past, they tend to have been built into the side portion of the power supply, and that's a hefty bit of equipment, so trying to figure out a way to get access to it through a hatch is something that takes a bit of creativity. However, by having the power switch on a separate cord, this allows you much more flexibility, and you can mount this thing anywhere you wish inside of the vehicle. And because of its small size, it also lends itself for some, again, better mounting possibilities. So for the T34, I'm going to go ahead and mount this in the front section right underneath the bow driver's hatch because of, again, the really ease of location in order to get access to it. And to do that, I had to make some modifications to the box itself. With the way I have the interior section of the T34 laid out in that location, we have that angle strip that's used to support the battery tray, as well as also it's used to hold up some other fittings for the front, namely the speaker, as well as also the bow MG, both of which I referenced in past videos. Well, there is some real estate available, and it's the perfect location to mount on the switch. However, I did have to make some modifications to the housing, and that's what we have right over here. In order to secure it to the strip, I have this bit of angle. This here is going to be bolted to the strip itself, and then the switch is going to be bolted to the rear portion that we have right here. So it's a nice, firm, steady mounting. It's not something that's going to just break off on you, which is something that can happen if you use an adhesive type installation, which will work for some applications. However, for this one over here, the fasteners are definitely going to be the stronger and the smarter choice. To do the modification, I simply just took the two fasteners off. I removed the kit supplied laser cut plate, and I cut a brand new section over here out of angle. That's the exact same dimensions as the original. So this one here just simply gets bolted on in place, and huzzah, the piece is now adapted and is ready for installation onto the vehicle. With the light switch now ironed out and taken care of, this brings us to the power switch. So there's the power switch now fitted to the model. As you can see, it just bolts right to the angle strip as I referenced before. And of course, the whole point of this is to get access on the reverse side by opening up the main driver's hatch, and we have the main power switch right there. Right now the tank is switched off, but you can see how easy access it is to get to the power switch, which for a radio control tank is obviously something that is quite relevant. Okay. I know, yes, it would be video malpractice for me to do the entire light installation and not have it complete with the actual lens itself. So, for those who were scratching your head and saying that, or pounding that into the keyboard, well, here you go right here. Here goes your dream fulfilled. So the tank is currently on. As you can see, the lens is in place, and with the lens in place, it really finishes up the look very nicely, and just such a nice focal point here on this vehicle. And with the tank being on, I'm just going to go ahead and trigger the thing, and there we go. Ta-da! We now have light. I see that the light is kind of on the top here. I think I'm going to go ahead and manipulate that a little bit. Just go ahead and pop this guy off, just so it's more in the center and it's a little bit more appropriate. It's one of those things that is a bit bugging me. There we go. Now that's really making me feel better. Alright, so the piece is now dead center and looks much more appropriate compared to having the LED shoved into the corner. But either way, the light, no matter how you slice it, is done. From the light area brings us to the next area, the model that needed to have just a final bit of polishing to wrap it up, and that is the front glacis plate. Since the last video, of course, the bow driver's hatch was fitted, but like I stated in that video, there are two holes found in these sections over here that need to be plugged up. The holes are there for the mounting fasteners, so obviously they need to be blended away just to complete the look. And at this point here, that has been accomplished. The holes were plugged up first with a two-part epoxy. Basically, actually, no, it's literally the same stuff I use for my sculpts. Went ahead, applied that for the bulk. Then once that's set, I went ahead and cut the axis off, sanded the piece as smooth as I can, and then for a final measure, a little smear of red putty was added to both thoroughly conceal the locations where the fasteners were, and also to give just a little bit of extra cast texturing. One thing that's great about the T34, I don't have to worry too much about polishing this here because, well, T34 going to T34. The pieces were cast on the real unit, so it's going to be a nice little true to form bit of detailing with the cast texturing left a little bit rough, or in the condition that we have here. Either way, the fasteners are thoroughly blended away and are no longer going to be an issue. The final bit of detailing that was also added at this time was the front little corner section that we have here. In a video or two ago, when I was working on the side hull details, matter of fact, you can see one of them right over here. On the side section of the T34, there are these triangular chunks of steel that are welded to the side. I believe they're for a so you can put your foot on it so you can climb onto the vehicle. But regardless of their actual purpose, the vehicle has 3 of them, 2 on the sides and the other one's dead center here on the front. The piece is made with the exact same stock as I referenced for the other 2. I made 3 of them when I was making the other set, so I just took the piece and finished it off. For this one over here, I went ahead and mounted it to the appropriate location. Now, one thing I do want to mention, that some fudging was required in order to get the piece to fit around the bow hatch over here. With the way everything turned out, the bow hatch sits a little bit higher than it would be on the real vehicle. It's something that's really, really subtle, but when it comes time for the piece over here, it's still in the correct location, only the location where these 2 are is a bit smaller compared to what it would be on the real vehicle. But just with the dimensions that I'm working with over here, this is the best I was going to get. Either way, at least the detailing is there, and it does look fantastic, specifically once everything is painted, and it will definitely look true to form. As for the piece itself, just like with the other components, it's all the exact same way. Installed to the vehicle here with some adhesives, and then epoxy sculpt was used to complete the rest of the detailing. Needless to say, this is a humongous step forward in the tank's construction. The completion of the detail fittings that are mentioned in this video literally wraps up the hull. The hull's done. Detailing wise, we're finished. The very last bit of detailing needs to be added to this model in order to get it into paint is the commander's cupola. And on that note, at the time of filming this video, the files are all done, and I have a set in production right now. As soon as the parts come in, I'll be able to drop that bad boy in place, maybe do 1 or 2 smaller things that need to be ironed out here or there, and at that point there, this guy here is ready for test drive, followed by painting. Yes, this thing is definitely coming to the end. And it feels awesome to say that, but it is definitely true. And with that, that wraps up this project update video for this 1/6 scale Russian Armortek T34 85 medium tank. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to this channel, where it's a great way to keep up to date on new posted content, being 1/6 scale radio controlled Armortek updates like this one over here, or my other smaller scale model showcase videos that frequently get posted to this channel. Another way to keep in loop of new posted content is by liking us on Facebook, where I have more photographs of this particular build that have been posted since the project start, as well as photographs of the other smaller and larger scale builds that have been seen on this channel previously. Furthermore, don't forget to swing by eastcoastarmory.com for more 1/6 and 1/16 scale builds and detailed components. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all again on the next one. Till then.